Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Today we're looking at the yet another 35mm SLR with the FD mount, but this is probably the top of the range camera from the T series. This is the T90 and this was launched in 1986, and I happened to buy one in 1986, not realising that in 1987 the EF system was coming out, so it was a bittersweet moment, shall we say, because it all kind of changed in 87. But this is quite a revolutionary camera at the time. This one's not a particularly great example. This isn't the original one that I had. This is another one that I bought later on. But this one isn't in particularly great condition. But it looks quite modern, considering it's quite an old camera now. It has quite a modern look to it. And this is brought about by the fact that everything in this is electronic. All the earlier manual focus cameras that we sort of look at, where things are placed is dependent upon the layout inside. As with this one, they had a lot more freedom to decide where to put things and how it was going to look. They actually brought in a German designer, I believe, to work with the Canon team to design this more sculptural shape. As you can see, it has this big grip on the side, and it's quite comfortable in the hands. It's a heavy camera. It is a heavy camera. FD mount, as I said, so to remove the lens, because I'm not really interested in the lens, this is a 50mm 1.8, and it's the new type as well. As you can see, there's another chrome on the back. Here you can see inside of the mirror box. So looking at the front here, we have a stop down lever here. Pretty standard place to have it, but it's quite, you know, you can get to it quite easily there. Obviously the mount and the mirror. There is a secondary mirror behind this one as well, because this uses silicon metering cells. There's one in the bottom, a bit like the Olympus, in the centre, and there's two housed in the top here. So when we start talking about metering, I'll explain why that is. Obviously you've got this sort of bit of a grip across the bottom here. Not much else on the front really. Shutter release at the top, and the famed wheels. This is the wheel up here for changing settings. On the side here, just a lug strap. And at the bottom, we've got a remote socket. You can also get a shutter button to go on there, so you can use it in the portrait orientation, and also things like there was a wireless remote control in valometers, etc. I think they all sort of plugged into that connection there. And like I say, you need a wired cable release. And then in here we have the power source, which is just 4 AA batteries, which does make the camera quite heavy, but they're relatively available everywhere really, aren't they? So on the back we have a flap, and in here we have some controls. So at the top we have the finder illumination, because this uses I think it's LEDs inside of it, and you can adjust the brightness of them. We have a battery check. This one does have a power rewind. The camera actually has 3 motors built into it. One motor for rewind, one motor for film advance, and another motor to cock the shutter and to move the mirror. And then at the bottom here we've got single shot, continuous shot. It runs up to 4.5 frames per second, and also the self timer. So that's behind the flap on this side. On the back we've got a film back, and you can see if there's film in it because it has this window. We've got L for lock. A turns the camera on. A button to set the ISO, exposure compensation, and push the two together for the safety shift. This enables you to change the selection that the camera's made if you don't like it. Here we have an exposure preview button, so this is a bit like the same as pushing the shutter release halfway down, and then it will show you the exposure. And I can't remember which one of these is which. One is highlight and one is the shadow area, and this ties in again with the metering. We have a shutter on the eyepiece is if you've not got your eye up against it, you can block out extra light. There should be a eyepiece on here, but I don't have that on there. And on the top, quite a simple layout. Obviously shutter button, that wheel that we talked about, an LCD display on the top, which we still have today. Hot shoe, this has got 4 extra contacts on it. There's a little window here to illuminate the viewfinder inside. And then we have some more push buttons here. So we have mode, we have metering and clear, and multiple exposure by pushing the two together, as well as a film plane indicator for use with macro work, and another lug. So we've got it turned on, so the first thing you would check would be your batteries. So if you open the flap up, push on the battery, test, we should get 3 bars. So if we can get his finger on it, it's quite a small little button. So there you can see that we have the 3 bars. So the battery is fine. Right, this camera is quite complex. It has quite a lot of different modes to it. At the moment, you can see, if I better tip this down a bit so you can actually see what we're looking at, and maybe zoom you in a little bit as well. That's better. So you can actually see the camera at the moment is in AV, which is aperture priority mode. So if you turn the dial, it goes through a selection of apertures. Because there's no lens on it, it thinks it's a 5.6. So I'll slot the lens back on. It now knows what lens is on there. They're not electronically connected. There's a mechanical coupling on the lens that tells it the maximum. So it goes to 1.8. So you select the aperture that you want to use, and you can push on this button here, or you can push partly down on this one and it will display the shutter speed inside. This part up here relates to the metering, and you can see it's using spot metering, and that's where the cell at the bottom underneath the mirror comes into play, and it meters only the middle 2 point something, I think it's 2.7% in the centre of the viewfinder. And very much like the OM4, it will allow you to take up to 8 readings by using this button here. This is a spot exposure button. So you can take up to 8 of them and it will average them out. And you can also use these buttons back here for the highlight and the shadow, very similar to the OM4 system. If I come over here and press on the metering clear, that will clear the settings that you've taken. But it also means that using this dial you can change to, that is the whole of the viewfinder, you know, it's like weighted metering, and then you have a smaller area than the whole of the screen but a bigger area than spot. I think that's about the middle 17% or something, if I remember correctly. So that adjusts your metering. Display at the bottom would show you your frame counter. This one along here is your exposure compensation, and if you press the mode button you can scroll through the modes. So you've got aperture priority, you've got program mode, which is aperture and shutter speed is selected by the camera, and you can use the program shift to change those settings. You have a P mode, and P mode's interesting because you have a tele mode, and that kind of puts the bias more towards the higher shutter speed. It's assuming that you're using long lenses. It doesn't know the focal length of the lens, unlike in the electronic systems that came later. But you've got 3 different modes for that. And then you've also got a wide one, and that sort of tends to emphasise the depth of field. So it gives you a higher F number and a slower shutter speed, so that you lose upper landscapes, that kind of thing, where you wanted the depth of field. And that's what that mode does. Then got bulb, which is B. Time value, so this gives you a selection of shutter speeds. As you can see, I think we've got half shutter speeds here as well, half stops. And this camera goes up to a 4,000th of a second and goes all the way down 30 seconds, so 30 seconds is the longest that it'll go to. That's on time value. And then we also have aperture value program. We also have a manual mode as well, which I think is what that M stands for, but I could be wrong on that, I can't remember. It's a long time since I've used one of these. Good cameras. So I prefer aperture value. To set the drive mode, you push on this little button at the bottom here, and it should scroll through. That's the high mode, the low mode. And then if you want to set the self timer, you can put the self timer down onto 10, so that if you push on the button, you can see it's counting down. There's no beep or anything. Yep, there we go. So that's a basic overview of the controls. Multiple exposure, like I say, if you push the two together, then you get the ME comes up and you can put in how many multiple exposures you want, up to 9 on the one frame. And on the back, like I say, you can set the ISO pushing this button in. That sets the ISO. I think the film we're putting in today, let's see what it goes up to. 6,400 all the way down to 6. So we're going to be using 200, but I want to knock it down a little bit from that one, expose it at 160. And really that's about it for the camera. Let's open up the back, have a look inside. Safety shift, exposure compensation. So you just push that button and you can move it across the scale, very much as we see today. So at the time it was very, very advanced compared to the cameras that came before, and compared to some of the cameras that we've looked at. And then open the back as a safety catch. This was promoted as a professional camera. And you can see why, because it's fully featured. There's a pressure plate that looks like it could do with a good cleaning. It's got the quick load system. There were data backs available for these as well. The shutter on this one's actually quite clean. The shutter is the weak spot on these. You'll find quite a lot of them for sale. They've got the E error message, and that is shutter related. And they do tend to jam up after a while. Deteriorating rubber, the usual thing. Right, will this stand on its nose? Yes, it will. So I've got some more of this Fuji film that we're going to use in this one. Say not a particularly good example, but it does have a nice shutter in it, which is the main thing with these. Pull the film across to the orange mark. That's probably a little bit too far, but still. Close the back up. Winds on, and there it is on frame number 1, ready to go. And it's still on the self timer, so I'm going to turn that off. Put it back on a single and continuous, so that brightens up the viewfinder display. I don't know whether you can actually see anything in there. So I still haven't mastered the hang of getting images inside the viewfinder. Yeah, it just displays across the bottom. So this is saying 6 at 5.6, but yeah, there you go. And that's on the brightest setting, and you can adjust the brightness of it as well, so it's not so bright. So that's a quick overview. It has one other trick up its sleeve, which is zoom back out again, and that is TTL off the film flash metering. I wonder where they got that idea from. With the dedicated flash gun. I do have one, just bear with me while I grab it. I hope that doesn't fall over. Oh, these cameras don't stand up. At the same time they released, this is a 300 TTL, which when used with this camera will give you, off the film, there's no batteries in this, it will give you off the film flash metering via that cell at the bottom of the camera again. Oh, trying to do this over the phone is not easy. yeah, this is a dedicated flash gun for this camera. There we go. Oh, it's even more heavy. And yeah, there's tilts and swivels, but I'll do another video on the flash with this camera. Tip you back up again, a bit shaky this film. But yeah, that's a dedicated flash. And I can't remember which one it is. Some of the newer flashes that you can use with digital also work with this camera as well. Some of the latest ones, because the system's pretty much the same in the digital cameras as it is in these. So there you have it, folks. That's a Canon T90. Highly recommended if you can get a good one without any errors. They're not particularly that expensive unless they happen to be in good condition and working. So they weren't made for very long, so I think they're going to become quite collectible in the future. I'm lucky that this one's got a good shutter in it, so that's the main thing to look out for. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you've enjoyed. Comments, questions, queries down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and look forward to seeing you in the next one.